Jacklyn Lord manages marketing and communications for the Society for Scholarly Publishing, which connects people who work in scholarly communications and publishing together. In this interview, we talk about her career path and long-time interest in online identity. This is a difficult time for people around the world. Higher education especially is going through major transitions as faculty and students adapt to online learning in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the reasons I still wanted to share this interview is Jacklyn's enthusiasm for connecting with people online and her openness about that journey. In this interview, we talk about online identity, privacy, and how our thinking about that changes over time. What does it mean to be online? This is something many in our community are thinking about, some for the first time. How can we stay connected and where? My upcoming webinar is about exactly that. On April 1st, we're talking all about how to stay connected online while social distancing, and how to do so with empathy. So be sure to register by going to theacademicdesigner.com today. I hope this interview inspires you to seek out friends and conversations you enjoy online. Hi, Jacklyn. I'm so glad to have you here today on the show. To get us started, I'd love if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name is Jacklyn Lord, and currently I work at the Society for Scholarly Publishing as a marketing and operations manager, but I think of myself as much more than that. I think of myself as a media communications professional. I'm a really big pop culture and media nerd, which makes my job and my hobby sort of blend together in a really nice way.
Oh, I love it.
I've been really interested in sort of media studies and the self and society in some form since I was a teenager.
Oh, that's
Um,
great. And
and
so it's
so,
really found a way into your career and your work.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I love that. So your work sounds really cool. How did you end up at the Society for Scholarly Publishing? What do they do and what is their goal?
Sure. So SSP is a nonprofit industry group that advances the field of scholarly publishing in specifically connecting individuals who work in scholarly communications or scholarly publishing to each other and keeping them abreast of trends, because it's really hard to know what's going on in your field while you're doing the work you need to be in the field as well. So we represent publishers, librarians, service providers, editors, authors, researchers, communications professionals, anybody who's doing knowledge work in the academic arena.
That's great. And you're helping to connect those people and really provide a place for them to stay up to date on things. Is that right?
Yeah, precisely. So my job is I do marketing and communications for the society. So I'm pushing out all of our resources. I'm sharing all the different trends that we might be giving a webinar on, but I'm also helping members get in touch with one another. I help run our community. We're starting a couple of new programs in addition to our mentorship and our fellowship programs. So my job is helping everybody sort of talk to each other around these ideas.
Oh, I love that. And that's so necessary, especially because you're bringing together people from all sorts of areas in publishing and trying to figure out how to best communicate with them. So your role is so important.
Well, and we're trying to get them to talk to each other too, right?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
we want the people who are producing the knowledge to be talking to the people who are buying the knowledge, and
Hmm.
then we want those people to be talking to the people who are trying to access that knowledge too.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. How did you end up in that role?
So it's kind of a long, windy path. I started out at the very beginning after I left undergrad. I had two internships, one in psychology and one in media studies. I
Hmm.
was working as a research assistant and a project director, and they were very perfect, but I needed a way to bring them together somehow.
Mm.
And so, studying all of these ideas about how media is changing people as I'm learning more about media studies and independent media, but I'm also studying a lot of social psychology. And in my head, I'm just like, oh, those are talking to each other. How do we make them talk to each other? So I decided grad school would be the place to go do that. So I went to grad school, and during that time, I got a lot more experience making those two things talk to each other.
Mm.
I and this was I'm dating myself a little bit, but this was about like 10 years ago, before the
Mhm.
idea that the internet what was real life was just starting to take hold. And
Right.
so I went to grad school and I was like, yes, this makes sense to me. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but we need to be thinking about ourselves on the internet in this very real way.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and then after grad school, I freelanced for a little while and was a consultant on, lots of different things. And then I was trying to figure out what would be the best way to do this. And that's sort of how I came into scholarly communication.
I love it. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm definitely not going to edit that out because I think that the journey that we take to get to the roles that we're in is really important. And it sounds like what really motivated you was both the psychology aspect and the communication aspect, and putting those
Hmm.
two things together was what kind of held your interest in terms of career paths.
That's absolutely right. I was always thinking, okay, how can I apply this over here to this other thing I'm working on? I would say maybe only in the last 5 years have I been doing something where I feel like, okay, this is touching on all of my interests and in one job, rather than
Hmm.
having, a couple little side gigs and a main job where it's
Right.
doing this and it's doing that.
Well, that's great. I love that.
I feel really, really lucky, in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so hard for us all to find, exactly what fits our personalities and our interests. And so that's awesome. Thank you for telling me about your journey to get there.
I'm in retrospect, it does seem like, oh, it seemed like such a calculated move. Like, oh, that makes sense, and that makes sense, and that position makes sense in the context of everything. But you only know that looking back, right?
Only looking back, definitely. So, one of the things that we all struggle with is being ourselves online. And you mentioned that that was something that you were interested in even 10 years ago. So, I'd love to hear about how you manage that balance on social media.
Oh, sure. So, I got online as a preteen, so I've had a really long time thinking about how am I presenting myself in different online contexts.
Can I ask, were you on Facebook or
At
MySpace?
Oh, no, like, I'm talking about, like, Angel Fire and Geocities.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
like, in the late '90s, I think I got my first screen name, my first AOL account in, like, 1995.
That's great. That's great.
So I've got a lot of familiarity with, like, internet culture and customs just from being a resident for so long,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? Um, and but that then became formed by my studies of media
Hmm.
studies and communication and identity, and sort of always thinking about front stage self and backstage self and performance studies and who am I presenting. And I got really into playing around with that
Mm.
on the internet. And now I like to think I've reached a very good blend of all of these different facets of who I am. And that that came through sort of learning best practices, but
Hmm.
also keeping what felt good for me. Like, I don't do everything that I might tell somebody to do. I kind of pick and choose what works best for me. And that is a big part of how I manage to be myself while I'm online.
Yeah. So you said that you sometimes give other people advice that you don't necessarily take. Can I ask for an example of that?
Sure. So, let's talk about Instagram. Everybody
Hmm.
is really into Instagram right now. I am not on Instagram,
Hmm.
not for any particular reason other than I've got I've got my networks and I'm doing them well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stick with them. The way that I engage with online content is not primarily a method that would lend itself well to Instagram. I
Hmm.
could do that, but I would rather spend my energy on the things I've already got going and do them well than,
Yeah.
switch over to another platform just because that's where everybody is.
Oh yeah, I actually completely agree with that advice. I always tell people to spend time where you're like already spending time and enjoying yourself. And if you feel like something's going to take up too much time or too much energy to do the way that you want to do it, just it's okay to let someone else choose
Right. Just
that.
pick one and do it really well, right?
Yeah.
And that gets back to what I was talking about, like playing around with it. There was definitely a time where I had a profile on every major site. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought like, this is the way to do it. And it was just too much, it was too much.
Overwhelming.
It wasn't me. It wasn't like,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be on all of these other sites, but I felt like I had to be there.
When you were on all those sites, can I ask, like, were you able to connect with people on each site? Yeah.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
No, it's
Yeah.
just, I'm there in case somebody searches for me, which,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that might have been a good plan a few years ago, but now it's not a good approach anymore.
Yeah, because you need to actually have conversations and be social on social
Yeah, like,
media.
but like, I need to see that you're here, right?
Right, exactly. Hmm. So, as a marketing person, the word branding isn't bad, but a lot of academics think that it is. I'm curious, how would you describe branding?
I think you're totally right. And it's not just academics. Everybody feels really bad when they hear the word branding. And I think that's in part because it's branding and marketing is the driver behind so much of our current media culture, right?
Hmm.
Buy these shoes or buy this car and make a statement about it.
Right.
Um, but if you think about your own personality, that in a way is your brand, right? Your personality is just how do all these different parts of who you are fit together in one unified story.
Hmm.
Personal branding to me is just spending time thinking about that. So thinking about what are the different selves I have and how do they fit together in a way that I want everybody to know about.
Yeah.
So, it's I think that we are seeing sometimes in marketing and advertising, we see this play between individuals and businesses where businesses are emulating individuals, and now we're kind of as individuals emulating what businesses have done with their branding. And I think sometimes for some of us that can feel kind of icky, right?
Mm. Icky. That's a good word for it. Yeah.
But it doesn't have to if you think of it as you're taking control of your own narrative, right?
Hmm.
Because somebody's going to look for you. What are they going to find? Do you want them to find what you've put out there, or do you want them to find whatever your friends have tagged you in, or whatever anybody else thinks is important about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important because it's not just about how we see ourselves. It's about how other people find us, even if they're not looking to discover those photos that your friends tagged
Right.
you in. They just want to know a little bit about you. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, I completely agree.
And it's not even just in a job interview kind of context, because I think that's where
Mm.
we all think about it, right? We all get on the job market and are like, okay, got to update my profiles, got to get a good headshot. But it's so much more than that. I like to think of it as what would it look like if I was to stop by your cubicle, right? Like,
Mm.
so it's who you are at work, but it's also a little bit more. There's a little bit more personality there. Some of the things that I've been thinking about too, since I've gotten into this line of work specifically, is how a lot of scholars think that there's something inappropriate about talking about themselves as a brand or their
Mm-hmm.
work as something that other people should talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think that might have held true when our audiences were smaller, but there's just so many people producing knowledge, producing content, and if you're not telling me about it, I'm going to miss it. I'm going to miss it.
Yeah, there's so much content, and I'm sure you know more specifically from the publishing side how much is produced each year.
Oh yeah.
So being able to talk about your own is pretty important.
Well, and I think it's unsettling because nobody wants to think that their work isn't going to be seen.
Hmm.
But that is a fact that if you're not making it seen, it's not going to be seen because there's lots of research that shows most people don't read academic books, most people don't read journal articles. So in my opinion, and this is sort of how I approach it from deep down inside, is that work is really valuable.
Right.
Why don't you want to tell everybody about it? Why did you do it if you don't want to tell me about it?
Mm-hmm. Or tell your own
Sure.
field, yeah, no, I understand exactly what you mean, but like the social media especially, it helps us reach really niche audiences sometimes.
Hmm.
If you have a hashtag that only people in your field are using and you can use that to share your work with them in a global context, why not take 10 minutes out of your day to do it?
Well, and the thing I really like too is that it breaks down the academia and practice divide. You know,
Mm,
if I'm a practitioner in as a marketing practitioner, I need to know what is best practice, and I want
right.
that to be based on data. I don't want that to be based on somebody's intuitions.
Mm, mm-hmm.
So, if you're telling me, if you've conducted a recent study and you found that, people are only spending 2 seconds on a particular platform, well, that's really good to know, and that's going to redirect what I'm doing in practice. But if you didn't tell me that, then I'm wasting all my time. You're wasting your time because nobody's going to find that out. And, I don't have access to a lot of scholarly journals, that's a whole other issue, right?
Right.
Paywalls and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think social media can be a way to not circumvent those, because I do think there's a lot to be said for compensating people who produce that knowledge. And
Mm-hmm.
we get in, getting into the publishing models as they are now is a whole other, that's that is, yeah, we can't have that discussion now. I don't even know where to begin on that. But I think, let's go with Twitter, because I think Twitter is a really great way to do this.
Right.
Using Twitter to boost who you might direct to those journal articles, to reach people who are outside of academia but might be interested in those journal articles. Why wouldn't you do that?
It seems like a simple question.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I can think of lots of reasons why you might not want to,
Well,
but
part of it does come back to that opinion of personal branding and what it is to kind of talk about ourselves online.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you know what humble bragging is, right?
Oh yeah.
So I think humble bragging gets a bad rap in that way,
Hmm.
but really, we should all be practicing it a little bit, because nobody else is going to brag for you,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
and clearly there are outliers who people are going to talk about your work because it's just outstanding. But for most of us, you got to brag for yourself. And especially in our culture that is so individualistic, and you got to be the one who's pulling yourself up. You have to kind of swallow your maybe icky feelings a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I think that's really good advice, because what I found, especially with the faculty that I work with, is once they try it once and they get a good response, they're like, oh, this is actually okay. People do want to hear about what I'm doing, and I was surprised by how many people responded and like
Yeah.
engaged with what I said, and so it usually just takes one swallowing of that icky feeling, or maybe two if you're on Twitter and like not a lot of people have seen your tweet. But
Right.
point is that it comes like really quickly, the feeling of, well, that was actually worth my time. That was
Mhm.
worth me talking about myself and putting it out there, and I got the response that I was hoping for.
I had a journal editor I worked with at a previous job who personally hated social media. She did not
Mm,
want anything to do with it at all.
yeah.
And we talked at length about how her journal was really incredible, but her reluctance to engage with social media was hurting the journal itself. Because she would say,
Mm,
I really want people to discover this, but I don't know how they're finding things. And so we would have these long conversations about how you don't have to put it all out there. And I think that that's what some people think when, especially professionals might think, is that social media
mm-hmm,
is just for everybody kind of out there being wild. It's for kids who don't have reputations to worry about.
mm-hmm.
That's part of it, yes. But then there's this other part where you should be on there managing your reputation.
Mm-hmm. Because there are more than just kids out there. I mean, there's people of all
Hmm.
ages, and they are all trying to find something that they're interested in or that will engage them. So if that's your content, if you're not putting it out there, they're not going to find it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So we've talked about Twitter. Is that your favorite social media platform?
It's I'm embarrassed to admit this, but it's not. Facebook is my favorite.
Oh, that's great. I haven't gotten that answer before, so I'm actually really glad you said it. Why is Facebook your favorite platform?
Wait, did you say nobody has said that before? Or
Yeah, I asked this question to like all of my interview guests. Almost everyone says Twitter. Some people say Instagram. I don't think anyone has said Facebook.
like, I do love Twitter. I love Twitter. I was a late adopter, but once I got in, I was like, yes, love it. But I think the thing I love about Facebook is that, it's the thing we love to hate. It certainly wasn't the first, but it was so groundbreaking and continues to be so. And there's something you have to respect about an idea that so has fundamentally changed everything. I mean, I'd be hard pressed to name something in my life right now that Facebook or the operating principles behind Facebook hasn't changed. And I mean, not only that, not only giving its due reverence, but I think it's like TV in this way that it's still where most people are, right? Like,
It is, isn't it?
like there's lots of other niche social media, but everything always ends up on Facebook anyways. And to me, there's a lot to be said for the network of the people, for better or worse, right? And that's kind of a loaded way to think about Facebook. But if that's
it's a little bit.
that's not exactly the network of the people, but there are users for whom Facebook is the internet,
Right.
and I think to blow that off is really is negligent.
So you love Facebook, and it sounds like you've liked it for a really long time. My question is, how do you use Facebook? Do you mostly connect with family and friends there? Are you on groups?
So it's changed over time, and I am definitely part of their new trending of pushing groups. I almost exclusively am using Facebook for groups these days. And I think it's kind of interesting. I mentioned being online for forever, and what I see it now, the way I feel like I use it is in much the same way I used to use chat rooms.
Right.
I'm a member of a couple of groups that I've made actual friends out of that, and I haven't made an internet friend in that way in years. So I think it's going to be this trend of getting away from the big megaphone, which is kind of what you can think of Twitter as like, I'm shouting at everybody and I hope somebody's listening. And some people are shouting back at us and sometimes we're listening. And I think Facebook now can be the place where we maybe go have these more intimate connections that, for better or worse, are hard to have on other platforms. I mean, yeah, I think that the walledness of Facebook does make it conducive to having these private chats, right? They're not private because Facebook owns them.
Right.
But
they're not as public.
Yes.
And yeah, they're not as accessible as a conversation on Twitter. Right.
Right. You can't find it by Google. And I think those are the in my idealized thinking of the internet, those are the conversations people want to be having on the internet. They want to get to authenticity. They want to get to those parts that maybe you don't want blasted all over social media. So I think that's why I like Facebook, because I do think it allows you, maybe not allows you, it forces you to reckon with both sides of yourself on the internet in a way.
Oh, I like that. So then it's also more about the self and how you're experiencing kind of talking with people and engaging with conversations. It's not just about what you like about the platform, but how it affects you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, especially as I've tried over the years to have, multiple accounts in different instances, one account for work, one account for family, even across platforms.
Do you still do that?
Until, I would say, if I'm being honest, until 2 years ago. No, until about 1.5 years. Yes, I used to do that. And then I kind of just decided to accept on some level that this online identity is never going to go away.
Yeah.
So managing 3 of them is hard and it's not fun. So I just try to be really conscious about the one I do curate. And so that doesn't mean everything is very polished, because that's not who I am. I am not a very polished person.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean I'm putting my worst moments up there either.
Right, right.
Those go in the walled garden of Facebook groups.
I love it. And I love that Facebook was your favorite and that you're really actively using groups. I think that's really interesting. I also like Facebook groups. I spend, I would say, more time talking in Facebook groups than I would be like on my Facebook wall or something.
Right?
So I definitely enjoy having conversations there. I've also met people in groups that I've kept in touch with, and I've found some really insightful things or like learned
Mm-hmm.
things from them, and I love that. But I also find that I have really good conversations on Twitter. So I do find it's in both places, and maybe that's because I'm not talking about things that are necessarily like need to be behind a wall. Like, mostly about like social media or like,
Well, the thing I love about Twitter is that it does expose me to more new ideas. And then
mm-hmm.
what happens is I usually take them from Twitter over to whatever group I'm in.
Yeah. Oh,
And I'm
that's
like,
great.
let's talk about this. Because I
Yeah.
might have opinions about it.
That you don't want to share
That,
publicly.
right. Like, I'll share half of my opinion publicly.
Yeah.
But then there's like maybe an asterisk that I don't want to share. But that's the part I do want to talk about with my peers.
Right.
Right.
And so that's what you bring to the Facebook group. I love it.
Yeah.
That's great. So what don't you like about social media?
I know that this is everywhere these days, but I just hate how mean everybody is. Like,
People get mean.
I understand it in some way. You know, it's our human nature that negative emotions drive more attention and more brain resources.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that. I understand why the algorithms work the way they do. That doesn't mean I don't like it. You know,
Okay.
people
Yeah.
are just really quick to assume the worst about somebody's post. We're still in this spot where we're not sure how to interpret text. And emojis, I think, do a lot to get that meaning across,
Mm-hmm.
even though some people think that's like the death of language. You know, I hate how our inclinations, some of our worst inclinations, social media takes those and makes those bigger. You know, it's just so much.
Definitely amplifies it with the current algorithms a lot of the time. Yeah.
Of course. And it feels good too. You know, I'm certainly guilty of
Mm-hmm.
looking at something and being like, can you believe this garbage? You know, so mission accomplished, your algorithm worked.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't make it good. And I think that's
Right.
sort of what we're seeing with Facebook pivoting to groups. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think they kind of, if we think back a couple of years ago to the Cambridge Analytica scandal,
Yeah.
you know, they faced a lot of heat for how ugly people can be online.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is my worst part of it, is that we all agree that it's terrible, but none of us are really doing anything about it.
So what would you say that you do in like your own life when you come across something that's mean that you're like, oh, I know that's too much. Like what happens? Do you like take that and go to your Facebook group or?
I've been reporting a lot now.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I feel even if it's like borderline where I'm like, you know what, that kind of, I don't know if that's hate speech, but I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think
mm-hmm.
whatever you're doing, I don't want to see.
Mm-hmm.
So I've become much more liberal with reporting things and blocking people and just saying, you know what, FOMO be damned. I don't want to see this. I don't want to see it.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I use mute,
Yeah.
you can mute people.
Mhm.
And so when I see someone who's like saying really divisive things but like, I don't want to block them because I don't know them or something. And I just mute them. And like, I can go on with my life and not have that, you know, popping up on my feed every day.
In some ways, I am kind of, you know, my own biggest troll, because I will get stuck reading those because I'm fascinated by how people are playing out these dynamics. But then I do have to take a step back and say, like, my mental health cannot take reading any more garbage comments today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no matter how much I think I'm gleaning about how people are interacting, I still got to walk away. I still have to walk away.
So you have to recognize, because you're interested in it. You're interested in the psychology of the conversation. You want to like sit there and read all of them, but you have to recognize when it's time to just take a step back.
Very much so.
That's funny. My fiance is always like, well, what are you so angry about right now? And it's always like some scandal in higher ed that I'm reading about on Twitter. I'm like, yeah, this thing is going on. And he's like, you should put your phone down for a little while.
Did you see this thing is trending?
Yeah.
This is crazy. But see, like, it feels good to commiserate over that. And so you can understand why it's so successful.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I'm flummoxed about it, because here we are being users who really enjoy what we do.
Yeah.
But we also kind of know that it's not the best for us.
That's very true. But one thing that I like is that we're both taking steps to kind of mitigate how we're experiencing that. And when we recognize that there's an issue, trying to figure out when to step away is also something that people should put into practice. Because the longer we stare at it, the more angry we get. And the more likely we are to like say something angry ourselves.
And I think that's kind of what maybe some people, why they choose to just not engage at all.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
easier. But you know, that's a choice you can make. You can. But to me, choosing not to be on social as a professional in today's world is like choosing not to have a resume. Oh, you can do that, but I don't know if that's a good choice.
That's such a great answer. Choosing not to have a resume.
Like, I mean, we all I do think of your social brand, right, is like, it's a more colorful version of your resume, a more personal version of your resume.
Yeah, I would definitely find it pretty strange if I like searched for someone and couldn't find anything. I would definitely be a little concerned.
That's almost more suspect these days.
Yeah. Because you have to like really actively be trying to keep your name out of things, I feel, to not come up in Google like for a social media or something. Definitely. Yeah.
And again, that's fine, but then people are going to think, why can't I find you?
That will always be the question, definitely.
Right. And maybe you've got a totally legitimate reason, but the other person who's searching for you does not know that.
Yeah, unless they find a way to actually reach you and like talk about it,
yeah,
which probably is not their initial query in the first place. Like,
exactly.
They're never going to know that.
They're just trying to find out who you are and like a snippet about you.
Yeah, even a couple sentences would be like, oh, okay, that's a person.
Right.
So my next question is, what do you wish that more scholarly writers knew when it comes to social media?
I wish they knew that it's okay to not do it perfectly.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
You know, I think that can feel really intimidating to do it just right. Especially when you can see, you know, oh God, I'm going to blank on her name, but there are a couple sociological scholars that I follow on Twitter who are just amazing with their social media presence. They're, you know, they combine their personal lives and their professional lives all in one beautiful package.
That's great.
It's okay not to do it like that. It's, you know, it's do it in a way that works for you. And if that involves only talking about work and nothing else, that's okay. That's okay. But then also, you know, if you do make a mistake, just, it's okay. It's going to be the nice thing. And the bad thing about social media is that it's going to be gone in like 10 minutes. Nobody's going to care.
That's true. And you could always delete the post or hide it from your wall if it's on Facebook. So there are steps you can take if you make a mistake. But like, I make typos all the time. I don't go back and correct them because I'm like, oh, that's okay. The people knew what I meant.
Well, and I think this, especially for academics, that sort of transparency about flaws is really, and I say this as somebody who is a recovering perfectionist, like, you don't want to let people know that you make typos, that you use the wrong word. Maybe you don't know what a word meant. That's okay though. That humanizes you. you know?
People definitely relate to it. They'll
Mm-hmm.
engage with it more often if there's like a small typo that's even funny. They're like, "Hey, let me correct this word for you," and then you start a conversation with them because they've read what you said.
Right.
Yeah. And I definitely I said typo because I think when people think mistake on social media, they think something bigger that will like
Oh
affect their
yeah.
job
Oh
or
yeah.
that will get them fired. But
They'll
like
be the
most
next
people,
trending hashtag.
yeah, like most people don't make those mistakes. Like you have to be pretty mean or like you have to say something really divisive and like you would know. I
Mm-hmm.
imagine you would know that like that's something that maybe you shouldn't say. You probably question it first. But the mistakes that most of us make are like a typo, maybe missing a word, like it
Right. I
happens
mean,
all the time.
I think what you said is right. Like you'll know if you're going to post something and you feel like, oh man, if my grandma saw this, she'd be so mad at me. Then don't do that. Or you know, take that to your private group where
Right.
you go be that side of you.
I've also
But
said like if you're really questioning, like just ask one of your friends. Like send it
yeah,
to them in a direct message and be like, should I not say this?
I mean, and I can understand being like, you know what, I'm not gonna take part in all that because it's just I don't have the mental
Mm,
bandwidth for it. Oh, okay. You're
yeah.
missing out. I think you're
Yeah.
missing out.
I would usually say like there's probably a platform that would work for everyone.
I
And
agree.
it may
I
not be
totally
Twitter.
agree.
Like Twitter is fast. Twitter is
It's so
it's a
fast.
lot. It is like you said, it's like kind of like a loudspeaker or a microphone. So like maybe that's not for you, but for other people like you know that works fine. So finding what you're comfortable with is also kind of part of it, I think.
Do you know about academia.edu?
I know what it
You
is.
know of it, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not big on it. I only know of it because it's like this it's social, but it's not social. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
this place for a lot of academics kind of go and put their research, put the results of their stuff and make connections that way. And so, you know, even if you're feeling like, okay, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, that's not for me. Go get on academia.edu, put your stuff online.
Yeah. The
What?
other one, Mendeley, does have
Yes.
like a little
Yeah.
bit of a social component where they do have groups where you can talk about things and share your
Hmm.
interests. So there are other options that are less kind of immediate than like
Yes.
Twitter.
Right. If you, I mean, maybe you feel really shy and you don't want to open yourself up to that sort of spotlight, which is totally understandable. There are ways you can tweak those, you know,
Hmm.
and so just don't write it off. Don't write it off.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Don't write it off. What do you enjoy most about social media? We've had a lot of conversations about like you how much you like Facebook and but what do you like overall?
God, I love all of it. I'm embarrassed by how much I love social media, honestly. Um, I think one of the things I just like about it is the variety of stuff I've been exposed to, good and
Mm.
bad. You
Hmm.
know, I follow people that I've only read about in classes and seminars, and I get to have this pseudo relationship with them, even though it's very one-sided. That is so cool. That is so
Yeah.
cool. But then I also get to interact with people who are part of subcultures I want no part of, but I still
Hmm.
think are kind of interesting because I want to learn about the world, right? And
Right.
so just the thing I love about social media is the way that it plays up to our human nature of wanting to be seen. We
Mm-hmm.
all want to be seen. And for better or worse, social media lets us be seen.
Yeah, for me as an introvert, social media as a place to like be seen and also to meet other people is
Yes.
really fascinating for me. I love that I can like meet so many people and have real conversations with them from like my living room.
Right. Like I am not the kind of if you asked me out for a drink at, you know, at the bar, it would take a couple of drinks before I would have the same level of engagement with you
Right.
as I would have with you online.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's so I don't know. I love it. And I'd be lying if I said that I didn't feel like it allows me to express myself in a
Mhm.
way that I feel is difficult in, you know, in real life.
Yeah.
It's just hard. Social media, I feel like, allows me to see lots of different parts of myself and play around with identity in ways that is just harder to do if I didn't have access to it.
One of the things that I liked that you said was how much that's changed over time too. And you're like okay with it changing with how your interests change, how your comfortability changes. And I think that that's great and something we all need to remember. It's okay if things change. It's
Yeah,
okay if our
they should
feelings about it
change.
change.
Yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think I feel a lot for people younger than I am who who have had their awkward growing up parts online.
Hmm.
Um, just because the amount they're going to change from the time that they made their first ranty post on some private message
Hmm.
to the person they're going to be when they're looking for a job. We have to allow that kind of change to play out in front of us, and we have to be okay with it
Yeah.
because it's going to happen for everybody now.
Yeah, for potentially forever. I mean, I know
Yeah,
that there are
yeah.
like articles that come out that are like, what will happen when social media goes away? And every time I see
uh
that, I'm like, I mean, it's not really going any.
I don't think it's going to go away.
There will always be communities where people are like going to be able to talk to each other. Maybe it'll look different,
Absolutely.
but it's not going to go away completely.
Well,
People like being social.
I mean, that was the not to be too like grandiose about it, but those sorts of communities are the reason the internet was made, right?
Yeah.
We all wanted to connect to people for some reason that were not in our immediate vicinity. We had something to
Hmm.
share.
Right.
That's not going to change.
Yeah,
How, like you said,
absolutely.
how it looks like is going to change, but the action is not going to change. Maybe it won't be so uh maybe we won't be so quick to judge
That would
other
be nice if we could get rid of a little of the meanness in the algorithms, right?
right, just accepting that some people have lived their entire lives online, and so you're seeing stuff that maybe you wouldn't have seen before, but if we could just understand that. And
Yeah.
you know i I think that sometimes I identify with younger groups in that way because I
Hmm.
do live online
Yeah.
so fully, or so.
And you love it.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't want that to be held against me.
Yeah.
you know and I worry that we will continue to hold that against people,
Mm-hmm.
rather than seeing it as just one more form of self-presentation, and
Yeah.
it is what you make of it.
I have one more question for you that
Yeah.
was not on my list, and you don't have to answer it, but I saw in your bio that you like Legos. I'm curious if you're watching Lego Masters.
Not yet. So I'm so glad you asked me about this, because so I have my son is 6,
Yeah.
and we're always looking for like what can we watch as a family that
Hmm.
is not cartoons, something other
Right.
than Frozen. And I saw the previews for this and I was like, oh my God, this is going to be great, because we watched Making It as a family and it was really fun. So I was like, this is going to be perfect for us. So we haven't put it on yet. I
But
feel
it's
like
on the list.
I feel like I might need to preview it just because it's on Fox. Like, it's probably fine.
I watched, so my fiance also likes Legos. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, he was really excited when the Lego Master show is coming out, and watched the pilot like the first day, like
Yeah,
when it
yeah.
came on
Was it good?
Hulu. It's like slightly overproduced, right?
Of course.
But,
Oh, yeah.
but
Well,
it's really funny. And they built these huge, amazing things that I'm always like, how did you do that? And
oh,
also, I'm
nice.
so glad they gave you 16 hours to do that and condensed it into a 1 hour show, because I don't think I could watch the entire thing. But
No.
yeah, there weren't any swear words or anything. Like, I think it's probably fine.
I
Um,
assume it's
it
Will
was,
Arnett, like,
yeah.
playing the Lego Batman character the
Oh,
whole time.
pretty much that is accurate. But they do build some pretty cool things, and it was pretty fun to watch.
Is it? I mean, I would hope that since it's a Lego competition, the competition is pretty friendly, not very mean-spirited. Because
This,
that's the thing that, like, I
they
worry
didn't
about.
seem mean to each other. I
Okay,
mean, like,
good.
I think they're all so into their projects, and it's like a
Nice.
big project. It would probably be hard to take time out of your thinking to like
To-
go diss someone else.
Well, I mean, we watched, that was why we watched Making It. It was so wholesome,
Yeah, it felt pretty wholesome.
That's, it's I'm sitting here in this office surrounded by Legos. Like on the other side of my computer
Oh,
are
I love it.
stacks and stacks of family Legos. We inherited my husband's from when he was a kid. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Well, I'm very glad that I asked that question then. And when you do watch it, I hope you enjoy it.
Oh my God. It's going to be, I don't know. I don't know when we're going to put it on, but for sure, it's on our list.
Well, this has been a really fun conversation for me. Is there anything that you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I'm so thankful that you asked me. Like I said, I watch you on Twitter and I'm just like, man, she's so cool.
I love it. Well, we're both thinking the same thing about each other. And so
Nice.
I'm glad that we finally connected. And we got to talk about all these cool social media things for all sorts of faculty and grad students that are listening.
I am always so eager to talk shop with people about it. Like I said, because it's my hobby, but it's also my
Yeah.
job. So, it always ends up coming up, and I I want people to enjoy it as much as I do, because I don't think it's going away. So let's have fun with it.
That's so great. Yes, let's have fun with social media. All right. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Jacklyn.
Thank you for having me. This has been super fun.
Thank you for checking out this interview. Since we're practicing good social distancing, I wanted my next post to be something super beneficial. Many of you have been talking about how a personal academic website is on your to-do list. I've written about websites before, like that you need one and that there are a ton of benefits. I've also warned you about pitfalls to avoid when making your website. My next post is a comprehensive how-to. So be sure to subscribe to The Social Academic today so you don't miss it, and more interviews like this one. You can find me on social media at Higher Ed PR, and you can read more from The Social Academic at www.theacademicdesigner.com/blog.